Good afternoon, Mark.
Hey, Miss Daigle, how are you?
Good. How's your day?
It's going well.
Good. Well, I just want you to know I really enjoyed observing your lesson the other day, and so our purpose is just to meet, to get together, and talk about your growth professionally.
Okay.
And we know that through that we'll continue to grow our students. We're going to spend some time talking about your lesson, discussing teacher and student behaviors with the goal of developing ideas on how to enhance student achievement.
Okay, sounds good.
In our time together, we'll spend about half an hour. We'll talk about things that were a strength,
Okay.
reinforcement in your lesson. We're going to talk about an area of improvement, and then we'll share your scores
Okay.
after this post-conference. So in reflecting, I'm sure you've had some time to think
Mhm.
about your lesson. What were your overall thoughts? How did you think the lesson went?
I thought it went pretty well. One thing that we kind of talked about in the pre-conference and I've been working on is the use of like criteria in the lesson. So I thought that went pretty well. It was cool to be able to kind of use that as a teacher and for the students to use it. I thought I like went back to it quite a bit, and it was even cool at the beginning that the students were able to like come up with that. I really liked that part of it. We started off and they kind of worked the problem. They talked in pairs. So I was actually impressed at how quickly like they were like most students' hands went up and they like
Right.
were able to pull out those things like pretty quickly. So that was
Definitely.
really cool.
So that was something you thought went well?
Yeah,
Okay. Did anything go differently than you had anticipated?
Some of the grouping was a little different. Like a couple of the kids I kind of pulled like did a little better, and then going around and kind of looking at the work, some of the students that worked independently did really well, and were able to move on, and then some kind of struggled a little more. So I don't know, that was a little different, but I thought
Yeah, so
pretty
overall, you had a good feeling about the lesson.
Yeah.
You were impressed with how the students remembered. You said in our pre-conference that you had worked word problems before.
Yeah.
You were using the models and the anchors and all, and so and I definitely saw evidence of that as
Yeah.
well. So in going back to what we discussed in your pre-conference and what you just mentioned, why would you say it's important to include those examples? What's a reason that it's important to include illustrations, examples of your expectation?
Yeah, I think even I think the criteria is like one kind of example and model of like what it should look like, but I tried to also like pull up kind of work and look at that and point out what those things like actually looked like. So it's not as just like kind of up in the air with, oh, we need to annotate the question and draw a picture, but they can actually have like, this is what that can look like
That's what it means.
from work, yeah. So I think that was helpful for them, so they kind of have, they know what they're supposed to do, but then they also know like what it looks like from like a student actually doing it.
Yeah, so that's why it's important. It's important for them to see the expectation in words and in examples,
Yeah.
and and so you already started to talk about what you did specifically in your lesson
Okay.
to make sure that those things took place. They had those examples.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you did in the lesson that you can think of that helped show students the expectation for new learning, other than the strong model, the criteria?
Yeah, I think once I kind of pulled that small group, I was able to focus in even a little more on what some of their deficits were and kind of guide them through. And it was a little easier just having like the 6 of them around me and like, showing and looking at different work and talking about it. More on, I think for that group, having the specific example of like that specific problem they were working on helped them a little more, whereas the
Yeah.
higher students can transfer, oh, this is what a drawing looks like and apply it to all problems. That group need more
Right.
support. For this problem we just did, why does this drawing look good? Why does this not?
So same concept,
Yes.
but just a little bit more supported, a little bit more specific, strategic with that small group.
Exactly.
Well, you described many of the things that I saw in your lesson, and those things were a definite strength. I think that they did exactly as you described. The higher level students were able to transfer easily, and the students in your small group benefited from that. And so some evidence that I captured that's reflective of what we were discussing. In your lesson, you began by reviewing what they'd previously learned, and you addressed the need to look at a strong model because you noticed that students were missing important parts needed to appropriately solve one-step multiplication problems, and you talked about that earlier. It was apparent that you'd previously modeled how to work these types of problems, either in the previous day's lesson or in past lessons when they worked word problems, because students were familiar with the problem and many students only needed to refine their work. Some just needed a tweak, so that was cool to see. You began the lesson with a strong model, exhibiting the attributes necessary to work the problem proficiently. You had students review the problem and pull out the attributes of the strong model to create criteria. Once a criteria was displayed along with the strong model, you allowed students to work word problems, some one step, and then the higher level students, just as you said in your pre-conference, two-step problems. They worked these at their desk while you worked with the small group. Within the group, you modeled how to work the problem. You said, first, as we work these problems, we will follow the steps of the criteria. What's the first step? Students said to read, which wasn't explicitly on the board.
Yeah.
They just remembered that. Okay, ready, set. And you with the students, you all read correlate. What should we do next? I actually like to underline the question, so let's underline the question. Next, we need to restate. I feel it's the best strategy to keep us organized, or I feel the best strategy to keep us organized is the 4-square strategy. So I will divide my paper like this. You explicitly show them how you expected them to do it. Let's read, write, and plan and solve. In the read spot, what do you think we'll write? And the student said, that's going to be our restatement. And then you wrote for them. There are blank in each group. Now I have my restate. Let's go back to the criteria and see what's next. The students said they needed to annotate. So you were following the criteria, but you were explicitly showing them exactly what you expected that to be. So it was almost the in-between step between the criteria and the strong model.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things that I noticed. You told kids to think about the operation. What operation are we going to do? The students did say division. You said, why do you think we'll do division? We have 36 students. We need to break them into 6 groups. Let's write our number sentence. Let's try to use the plan box. You even show them how to draw the pictures. And so the students then who weren't quite with you, I mean, they did it with you, they made adjustments. So they almost had, from your model, their own model of the expectation, because then you allowed them to work somewhat independently after you showed them exactly the expectation. And you even went back and said, once you complete the problem, move to the next one, and you reminded them to use the strong model and the criteria.
Yeah.
So they had that extra layer of support with an additional model that you very strategically presented to them in the small group. It's important to use those visuals with examples, illustrations, and analogies. They're important tools of introducing or reviewing concepts, and this always leads students to mastery with specific skills in a more efficient manner, because you identified early on that those kids would need extra support. Because of the support you provided them in the small group, they were able to make that kind of transition between criteria, strong model, and what to do.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to continue to do that. I know that you've been working on that since your previous evaluation, and it is evident that it is moving your students in a higher level.
You. Yeah.
So continue to do that. And so we're going to transition now just a little bit, because we talk about all the positive things in your lesson, and those are the things that move your students into proficiency, mastery. But with every lesson, there's an area that we can tweak just a little bit to enhance student learning as well. And we say enhance because, you had some amazing things happening in this lesson. But if you could think of something that you would maybe do differently, we kind of started talking a little bit about it, but more specifically maybe this time.
Yeah.
What would that be?
One thing I noticed kind of throughout the lesson is, especially with students in the carpet, but even students at their desks, if they got stuck or had a question, their kind of first instinct was to come to me, which was fine. It's good that a lot of them knew when they were stuck, but there were even a lot that maybe didn't even know when they were stuck and didn't come to me. But one thing I've kind of heard from feedback when different people have been in my classroom is making the transition to make it a little more student centered. So I don't know, I thought the criteria was helpful, but I felt like I was having to do a lot of answering the questions, and if they came to a problem, their first instinct is Mr. Bell, how does this look? Is this right? What is it new? So it's maybe they're not fully using the criteria yet, or it needs to be shifted. But that was one thing that I would I felt like I had to do a lot as the teacher, and it would be cool to kind of be able to transfer that to the students a little more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense to me. So I'll kind of take what you've given me and I'll pose a question,
Okay.
something for you to kind of think through just a little
Yeah.
bit. When you plan a lesson, why is it important that you incorporate or you include opportunities for students to generate questions that lead to further inquiry and also that self-directed learning? Why is
Yeah.
it important for us to plan for that?
Exactly. I think if you don't have those, and if it's just kind of like steps, or if it's just kind of like this is what you need to do, one, if they have questions, they might not know how to ask them. And like some of the students that didn't maybe perform as highly and just kind of stayed at their desk and like maybe made mistakes but didn't know why. I didn't kind of plan for those questions and teach them how to ask those questions. But then also, it would be important to plan for those questions because eventually, you kind of said that like self-directed inquiry, like I would